So for this next project, we're going to build a building using some tools that'll make it quite a bit faster. But these tools are a little bit hard to get used to, so I want you to pay close attention. We're going to use something called Duplicate Special and a few other tools. So to begin this project, we're going to create polygon primitives cylinder. And we'll choose the options box. We have a little control here. And now it says the radius is set to 2. I don't want the radius set to 2. I want the height to be radius 1, the height to be about 16. Axis divisions 20 should be fine. Height divisions 1, cap divisions 1, those are both fine. And then I want it to be up and down, so it's created on the y-axis. So I'm going to click on create, and I'm going to end up with a long stick like this. Hitting 6 to make it solid. But I'm going to build a building with these things, but I think they're a little bit too boring and lacking in detail. So I'm going to add some detail to that. And if you remember, one of the tools we use to add detail is under the polygons menu system, under Edit, Mesh, Insert Edge Loop tool. So my rule is that I only like to insert one edge loop at a time, and then sculpt, and then insert another edge loop. I'm going to break that rule this time. I'm going to add about 12 edge loops before I do anything with them. I hit Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop tool, and then I'm going to click and drag on one of these edges right here and make edge loops. Being careful to only click on the edges that go up and down, and then creating an edge loop that will cut across those edges. And I'm going to space them fairly evenly all the way down, and I'm going to add about 6 edge loops up here at the top. So there's 4, 5, 6 edge loops here, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom and add another 6 edge loops down there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now if you added 6 or 8 or 5, it really wouldn't matter that much. You just need something that you can sculpt with this next little adventure we're going to try. So here I am at the top of this. I'm going to select most of the edge loops at the top and hit spacebar on my keyboard, and then go to one of these either side or front view into the cylinder. They're both going to be about the same. And hit F on my keyboard so I can kind of center one of these top ones. Hit spacebar and 6 to make it solid. So I really want to look at one of these things on the side. I don't want to be in edge mode though. I want to be in vertex mode. So I'm going to right click vertex, and I want to select a row of vertices. And I'm going to show you how to do this the wrong way first, so you won't make this mistake. It's a mistake almost everyone makes. But when you're using the scale tool, what we're going to do is scale this row. A lot of people are just going to want to grab that and go ahead and sculpt their thing how they want it to look. So we can do that, and it looks kind of cool. You know, we got our shape to it. Except if we go back into our 3D view, you can see that I only sculpted it in one dimension. If I look at it from here, it looks right, but here it doesn't. So I'm going to undo that. You can see it going back to round there. Let's go back to this mode here again. And when you use the scale tool, use this manipulator, not this one. So sculpt here. Notice it's making it taller too when I do that. That's okay. I can just grab that and make it shorter. And you're just going to sculpt here randomly, any way you want here, just to give it some shape. And there. That's all I want. Some stages there of giving it kind of this old-fashioned column look. Checking that, make sure it looks right all the way around. Everything is round and nicely shaped. Looks good. I'm going to select those vertices down at the bottom. Go back to this view here, hit F on my keyboard to center on them, and I'm going to sculpt them similarly. Grab some of these verts, scale them, grab some more verts, do some more scaling, and something like that. I kind of want this to be bigger again, so expand that out, shrink it down, maybe move it up. I don't know. Get whatever look you want out of this thing, and then we'll move on. I'm going to hit A on my keyboard to frame in the whole column, And there's something I don't like about the column. Something that you'll notice when you look at a Roman, Corinthian, Greek column is that they're smaller on the top. There's actually a reason for that. They want their buildings to look more imposing, so they make the top of the column smaller in order to do something called forced perspective. Forced perspective means that if I'm close to something and it's bigger, and then that object gets smaller as it gets farther away from me, the end of that object will look like it's farther away. So as a person walking up to a Greek temple, I want them to be intimidated and feel small compared to the building. So I'm going to use forced perspective to make that happen. And that's why the tops of these columns are small. It'll give your project a little extra detail if you want to do that. You don't have to. I'm just kind of teaching you a principle. All right, so now I have this column created. If I go into object mode, you can see there it is. Notice these lines, though, that separate these kind of stages here are not working. They're kind of invisible. So I'm going to edge mode here. I'm going to select this edge, and I'm going to change the normal on it. The normal is right now, you can see that this thing is made out of flat faces, but the computer renders it as if it's round. And it remembers that from before I added these edge loops, and it kept them round. So what I need to do is I need to say, hey, you know what? These are not round edges, these are hard edges, and render them as if they're hard. And I have to kind of force the computer sometimes to do that the right way. And in this case, I'm going to hit normals, harden edge, and that's going to make that edge. Now if I go to object mode, you can see that hard edge right there looks a little bit more detailed. So normals, let me select actually a bunch of these edge loops. I want this one, this one, this one, that one, and this one, all selected, and we can hit normals, harden edge. Now if I later change my mind and I say, oh, I want that to look more rounded and not so hard and jagged, I could select that edge again and do normals, soften edge, and I would get a similar result. But now I have that bottom one looking the way I want. And now let's go do that same thing on the top there. So in edge mode, double click on that edge loop, double click on that edge loop, that one, that one, that one, and that one. Normals, harden edge, and it'll harden all those edges there. Okay, now I have my column finished, and I want to make a bunch more. But I don't want to have to do it over again, and doing repetitive things is what computers are best at. So I'm going to take this column, move it over here somewhere, maybe towards this edge of the grid, and I want to duplicate it so there's a bunch of them all revolving around the center here. So in order to make that happen, I need to move this point right here. Where the arrows align is called the pivot point. Notice if I'm rotating, it rotates around this point here as well. I want to move that pivot point to the center. In order to move the pivot point, I held down D on my keyboard, and then in this case X on my keyboard, and it will snap it to the grid, and it'll let me move my pivot point back exactly in the center of my project. X0, Y0, Z0, the very center location. Now notice if I use the rotate tool, instead of rotating around itself, it's rotating around this new pivot point, which is exactly what I want. Now I need to make some more of these, so let's do that. Edit, duplicate special, options box. The duplicate special tool will allow me to duplicate in ways that are repetitive. Notice it says number of copies. So that's the first decision I need to make, is how many of these columns do I want. Let's say now I want 8 columns total, and I already have one, so I want 7 columns for now, 7 copies. And I want all the columns to be the same size as the previous one, so I'm going to leave the scale at 0. And I want them to be basically in the same location, but I want them rotated around the y-axis. So this is X, this is Y, this is Z. I'm going to change the X rotation. So I have to take 360 and divide it by 8, and I get somewhere around 45 degrees. Each column should be 45 degrees off of the other one. Now if I hit duplicate special, it will create 7 more columns and align them perfectly around this new center that I've created. And that's what I want, is this kind of all around in a circle thing. Now I'm going to do another thing here. Create polygon primitive cylinder options box again to give me some control. This time I'm going to make the radius like, I don't know, probably something like 16 for the radius. And the height this time is only going to be 1. And the axis divisions is only going to be 8, one corner for each of these things. What I'm basically making is a flat pancake or a flat disc that my columns will sit on top of. Excuse me. 16 was a bit much, so I'm going to delete that. Create polygon primitive cylinder options box there. Let's make the radius 14. Let's try that. That's a bit better. I'm going to move this down now towards the bottom of my columns. I'm going to go to the side view over here, front view, whatever it is, and move this down so that those are just on the bottom. If they go through a little bit, that's no big deal either. And now I want another one of these tablets or pancakes or whatever these things are. So I'm going to do Command D, which is duplicate, but not a special duplicate. So duplicate and put one up there. But it looks kind of funny. Because of the forced perspective, it makes the top one look bigger than the bottom one, which gives it an unbalanced look. So I'm going to use the scale tool to scale it down a little bit before I set it down on top. Okay. Now I have both of those guys on there. I can do some detail work on there if I wanted to. Like I could go face mode, click, click, double click, and that would select all the faces around that ring. I could do edit mesh, uncheck keep faces together, and then do an edit mesh extrude. Some ideas here. You can pull this down and then do another extrude, and now you can see it kind of has this detail all the way around this little area up top. You could do that any way you wanted. Lots of different options here. You can sculpt this building to look any way you like, but it needs a roof. There's a few different types of roof, but I want to teach you how to use NURBS just a little bit. So we're going to actually make a NURBS sphere on top of this roof. Create NURBS primitive sphere options box, and we're going to start by making our NURBS sphere go from 180 to 360, and we're going to build it on the x-axis. Then click on create, and it's going to make this dome shape for us. Notice this NURBS sphere doesn't go all the way around. It starts at 180 and goes to 360. If I were to change that to 270, for instance, you can see that it's only going to here. If I change it to 90, it's going a little bit farther around. You can make a little Pac-Man. But in this case, I want 180, so I'm going to make that like that. And I want to move this guy up here. Move about there, and then I'm going to expand it using the scale tool out to here, and scale it down a little bit so I get kind of that bulby shape on top there. So that's kind of the basics of this temple building that we're going to build. But we need steps leading up to it, so I can click on that one. And we're going to do the duplicate special tool again, edit, duplicate special options box, and set those settings again. This time I'm going to make it wider and longer, but not thicker, so I could make it 10% bigger in each direction here, but I don't want to make it 10% bigger in the Y direction. I don't want them to get thicker, I only want them to get taller or wider and thick and longer. So 1.1, 1.1 will make it 10% bigger, and this one will leave it the same. Click, make 3 or 4 copies of that, duplicate special. Oh, Forgot something important here. Forgot to add the -1 in the Y direction. Duplicate special, and it creates those guys for me. Now I have a bunch of steps leading up to that building, and I'm going to take all of those items that I have here and hit Edit, Delete all by type, History, Modify, Freeze their transformations, which is something you should do before you use the Parent tool, which we're going to use right now. And I'm going to parent all of these objects right here to the top. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on the top, and then click on it again. So now this one's green. I'm going to hit the P tool or Parent tool, and now when I click on this top, it'll allow me to select all of these objects all at once. So I'm going to use the Move tool and move this item out of the way, and now we're going to kind of forget about it out there for a while we finish the rest of that project.